What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the show. As always, I'm the Grim Narrator, and today we're getting into a little of r/Let's Not Meet. And see if we can find something a little spoopy, maybe. Who knows? Get that shit away. Alright, our first one is posted by the user Princess Vanna. Vanna? Maybe? I don't know. A midnight visitor in a cabin in the woods. This is a true story. Every time I tell it, it puts the eyes in front of eyes of everyone in the room. What? It pulls the eyes of everyone in the room. I think I understand. Maybe. I'm not sure why I haven't posted it here before, but upon reflecting with a friend, I decided it was time to share. In the summer of 2020, my friends Alex and Violet and I decided to go on a mountain vacation. COVID cabin fever had hit us hard, and we were desperate to get out. We settled on a mountain estate and planned to camp and hike at several different locations. For one night, we thought it would be fun to book a cabin in the woods. Violet's parents had rented a fire tower once and loved it. I'm not sure what a fire tower is, to be honest. But a cabin beside a fire tower was all we could find. It was cheap, clean, and secluded. Excited to have a night where we could be as obnoxious as we wanted, we booked it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, we decided it would be a great idea to drop acid at the cabin. I can see how you thought that. Violet bought an entire sheet in preparation for our arrival, and it was tucked in her bag as we pulled out of the driveway to make our way to the cabin. I remember this knot in the pit of my stomach, this aching feeling that gnawed at me. I told Alex and Violet that there was no way we could drop acid that night. Violet was pissed. We turned around and got into a massive argument, but I stood my ground. I just knew that we had no business tripping that night. Finally, the fireworks settled, and we were off. The cabin was roughly 30 minutes away from the nearest town. It sat atop a mountain. We held our breath, and as we rounded the busted road that spiraled toward the top, there were no pull-offs, no other campsites, just a long, winding road that led us to a cabin at a peak. We settled in and started a fire to keep warm. As dusk gave way to night, we heard the unmistakable noise of an engine on the road, then the flash of headlights. A side-by-side with 3 kids arrived, and our nerves settled. They smiled, gave us a wave, climbed the fire tower, and left. We'd heard there may be occasional visitors to the fire tower, but they were the only ones who'd come by. We doused the fire and moved inside, heated some hot dogs until they were lukewarm, ate them fast, and sat in silence. You don't know how quiet it is until you're in the middle of nowhere. You can hear every rustle of the leaves, the whisper of the wind on their branches. You get so used to white noise living in the city. There's always the hum of an air conditioner or the dim roar of traffic to focus on. Here, the closest thing to white noise is the sound of our own breathing. We jumped at every noise, too frightened to speak to one another, and finally, I'd had enough. I cracked a few wine coolers, passed them to Alex and Violet, and slapped a board game down on the table between our bunk beds. It didn't take long for us to loosen, and we were laughing, having the raucous good time we'd envisioned. Much soberer than we'd thought, but enough that we were able to ignore the rumble in the woods. Later, we'd all recall hearing noises in the background, the snap of a twig, the dim rumble of an engine. None of us wanted to rupture the air of nonchalance between us, so we ignored it. Until a human hand reached up to the window between us and slapped it 3 times. We were screaming in an instant. Alex called 911, put them on the speakerphone, and handed his cell to me. He grabbed pokers from the fireplace and passed them out. Violet started calling family members and saying her last goodbyes. I held my breath and listened for any more noise. Whoever this was, whatever this was, would have heard us call 911, and now they were being careful to make a silent retreat. Dispatch arrived 20 minutes later, and lucky thing for a 1 a.m. emergency call, and had their dogs comb the mountain. Nothing. They suggested it may have been a bear, but I could tell from their faces they didn't believe that for a second. We'd barely cooked those hot dogs, and why would a bear smack the window by a couple of screaming kids rather than the one closest to the pan we'd used to cook? Why would a bear knock on the window like a human? Why, when we screamed, did the bear make a stealthy retreat? They had no answers. But they had one anecdote. As they'd sped to us, they'd come across a car at the base of the mountain, but that was the only sign of life they'd seen. I remember my blood ran cold, but Violet and Alex were too frazzled to absorb the weight of what they'd said, and dizzied by a new horror, Violet's car, thoroughly dusted by her drive up the mountain, was covered in handprints. Handprints that didn't match ours, that touched places we hadn't. We grabbed our shit by the armful and threw it inside, eager to remove every part of ourselves from this mountain. We'd followed the police, grateful every pothole found us further and further from that wretched cabin. We made it down in record time and found a lodging at a seedy hotel that reeked of cat piss. I couldn't sleep. The thought of that car on the road rang in my head. Remember, there was nothing else on that mountain. It was a narrow road to the top, no pull-offs, no other campsites. There was the fire tower. Maybe a visitor decided to spook us during their late-night excursion. But the kids from earlier, we'd seen their headlights. Whoever did this had stopped their vehicle further down the road and hiked the rest of the way. They didn't want to be spotted. They wanted silence, secrecy. Whoever this was hadn't been looking for a cheap scare. They'd planned this. I don't think I'll ever know what the person on the mountain wanted from me. I don't know if it was a practical joke or the beginning of a night terror. I'm grateful for Alex's quick wit in calling 911. I wonder if our visitor knew we had service. It had certainly been a welcome surprise to us. Perhaps that was a wrench in his plan, enough to spook him before he could make things ugly. In truth, I don't know if I want to know. I think I'm just content to say, Midnight Stranger, let's not meet. That was kind of, in my opinion, a minor letdown. I mean, it was just someone who slept on the window a few times, and that was the end of it. It's fine, though. Next, we have You Made the Right Choice. Posted by the user, That's Ridiculous, Dude. So, this happened a couple of days ago. I live in the suburbs of Northern California with my parents in an upper middle class neighborhood. My parents are away for their anniversary, so I've had the place to myself for the week. So I got home from a late shift at work around 1 a.m. I go inside, shower, and I head to the kitchen and make some buffalo wings for dinner. I crack open a beer and sit in front of the TV. I was sifting through movies to watch on HBO Plus when all of a sudden the doorbell rings. It actually startled me to the point that I actually jumped off the couch, knocking over my beer in the process. It's now 2 a.m., and there was no good reason for anyone to be at the door at this hour. I just started in the direction of the front door for several seconds. Stared. Dyslexia. Before it rang again, followed by a rapid knocking on the door and the window. Now, for whatever reason, I was no longer scared, but more annoyed at the fact that some idiot would think it's appropriate time to be banging on someone's front door. I head over to the front door, unlock the deadbolt, and pull the front door open, leaving the chain in place. In the heat of the moment, I did not think to look out the window first. I just yanked the door open. Standing on my front porch was a woman, around her mid-20s, with long, silky black hair and a purple hoodie with black pants. I said, "Can I help you?" To which she responded, "Yeah, sorry to bother you so late, but my boyfriend and I are having some car trouble, and our phones are dead. We're wondering if you could possibly let us use yours." She pointed up the street to a dark-colored sedan parked underneath a street lamp and said, "See, that's us right there." Now, had this been any other person, I'd have said no, but she looked innocent, like she was a college student. I live in a college town, and it wasn't uncommon for college kids to be out late on a Friday night. I asked her where her boyfriend was, and she said he walked to the gas station to see if anyone had a phone there. I pulled out my iPhone and told her to make it quick as I was about to go to bed. She thanked me and said she'd only take 2 seconds. She took my phone and dialed a number and put the phone up to her ear. After a couple of rings, whoever she called picked up and said, "Yeah." And she said, "Yeah, it's me. I'm borrowing someone's phone." She stopped talking and I could barely make out a man's voice on the other end. Now at this point I started to feel uneasy. She was taking a lot longer to be done with the phone call and I started to get impatient. The whole time she just stood there staring at me with a wide-eyed expression and a creepy smile that looked forced while this person on the other end kept talking. She finally said, "Okay, bye," and handed me my phone back. She then said, "Do you think I might be able to come inside and use your bathroom?" I said no and wished her good luck before shutting the front door. Right as I was about to walk away, I heard her laugh and say, "You made the right choice." I looked out the peephole and she was still standing on my porch, but now she had bad, she had a man standing next to her. They spelled it wrong. And looked to be around her age and was wearing a hoodie and face mask. The pair started to circle my house, banging on windows and laughing. I didn't hesitate to call 911 at this point. They stuck around for several minutes, trying to get in through my back door. I had my Glock 19 in my hand, aimed at the back door with 911 on the speaker, and was prepared to do whatever I had to do if they got in. They banged on my door for around 5 minutes before they finally left. I watched them run up the street to that same black sedan I mentioned earlier and take off up the street. The cops showed up a few minutes later and took a report. They told me I was the third person to call them that night reporting a suspicious couple attempting to enter their homes. I don't know what they had planned, but I'm inclined to believe it was nothing nice. Moral of the story is never answer the front door at 2 a.m., especially without looking to see who it is first. I learned my lesson that night. Alright, we'll do one more for this one. While trying to scare the creepy man, I became the creepy man. Hosted by the user Tar Minister? I'm not sure. Anyway, this all happened about 5 years ago when I, male, first moved to the capital city of my country, also the biggest city. I was living in a flat with 2 of my friends, both female, Tina and Laura. They shared a room while I had my own small room. My bed was directly under the only window in the room. The apartment was on the ground floor, so if you walked by the building you were on eye level with the windows. This, however, was never a problem, as there were no paths leading past the building on that side. It was just around 20 meters of grass and some trees, and then the road. At this point, it is also worth saying that I am a sword enthusiast and own several swords. This will be relevant for later. All swords are battle-ready quality for those who want to know, as I like using them in cutting practice and therefore wall hangers are not an option. Oh boy. Now on to the point of the story. My roommates and I were hanging out in their room one afternoon. As we were talking, Laura mentioned she thought she heard someone knocking on the window the night before, and also thought she saw someone on the other side of the window. Tina and I did not really take it too seriously, as Laura had often had wild dreams and could be a bit of a scaredy cat at times. Now it is worth noting that all of us enjoyed playing pranks on one another, so in the evening of the same day as we were returning from the shops, Tina and I decided to knock on Laura's window as a prank. Of course, we scared her a lot, so we apologized. She laughed, said we got her good, and we all went to bed. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and heard knocking. I was convinced that Laura is trying to exact her revenge, so I just looked through the window and to my surprise saw a strange man on the other side. At first I completely froze and just stared at him. He looked like he was in his 40s or 50s and had blonde or gray hair. I didn't see him well in the dark. The staring contest must have lasted about 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. Then all of a sudden he broke eye contact, reached down and pulled up his pants. I didn't realize before, but he had his pants down. At that moment I also saw a knife in his hand. That unfroze me, and my first thought was that I had to defend myself. In retrospect, I find this silly, as there was still a large window between us, and he presumably only had a knife. Now I'm quite large, 190 centimeters and 100 kilograms, so I had every confidence I could take this guy. But since I thought I saw a knife, I grabbed one of my swords, a hand and a half bastard sword, and went to open the window. All of that took me a couple of seconds. The creepy man was gone, but I was in a bit of an adrenaline rush, so I opened the window and jumped out. I started looking left and right, trying to see where he went. After about a minute, there was no sign of him, and my adrenaline wore off. I stood there still as a stone for a couple of seconds with my sword in my hand. All of a sudden, I hear a scream. It came from the road that was approximately 20 meters from my building. It took me a couple of seconds to realize what had happened, but I finally realized that a woman, probably in her 20s, saw me standing there from the road. If the sword in my hand wasn't scary enough, I must also add that I slept naked and didn't have time to put any clothes on before jumping out. I tried to scream sorry and I can explain, but the woman ran away. Good on her. I crawled back in and put on some clothes. I went to wake up my roommates, but they were already awake. Apparently they also heard knocking on their window, but decided to ignore it since they thought it was me. They completely woke up and heard the scream and looked through the window to check. They just saw me trying to climb through the window. We stayed awake since we were all too shocked to sleep. We were just talking about calling the police when the police drove up the road. They got out of the car and started walking up and down the grass in front of my window. As they approached the window, I opened it. They said they got a report about a naked man climbing through this window. Luckily, no mention of the sword. I told them it was me and the entire story. They only half believed me, and I'm pretty sure it would not end well for me if my roommates didn't back me up. We later filed our own report. We never saw this man again, nor heard anything back from the police. To conclude, creepy man, let's not meet again. And to the woman I accidentally scared, I'm super sorry, and let us also not meet like this again. And that was our 3 stories from the r/Let's Not Meet adventure for today. What did you think? Were any of those really that creepy? What the hell would you have done? But that'll be it for today. You can find me at the Grim Narrator or Grim Narrator across pretty much any social media. And we're also available on all your normal podcast settings. So until next time, goodbye.